Okay, having a second go at setting up the live stream. Configure the computer properly this time so I won't have any problems. Won't be long. I'm just pulling up the second screen so I can see any comments coming in on the live stream while we are messing around in the simulator. So fingers crossed. So let's go and check the sound levels before we do anything else. Okay, so yeah, the aeroplane isn't too loud, you can hear me over the top of it, which is always good. So we are on the ground at Stansted. I'm going to go and change the weather slightly. So I've spawned on the runway, on runway 22 at Stansted Airport. Let's go and say we'll have a few clouds, because I don't want weather to be a factor. It's just really as a demonstration. I've had several people have asked me if I could do a demonstration of this in the simulator, so we're going to set kind of a late summer lunchtime in the UK with nice weather, and we'll be able to just concentrate on flying the aeroplane rather than combating crosswinds or anything like that. So we're going to do two circuits of Stansted. The first one will fly around on the autopilot. On both circuits we will use the autopilot, so we don't have to do much. But on the first circuit I will go fully manual when we turn in towards the airport and land manually. Then we will accelerate and take off again, and then we'll do another circuit and come round, and we'll use all of the avionics systems to bring us in completely automatically. Okay, so we're inside the aeroplane, we've spawned on the runway. This is exactly as the simulator has left us, sitting on the runway, so you could do this at any airport, anywhere. Before we get going, we're just going to make sure that our controls are working correctly. So we've got throttles and we can manipulate them, we've got parking brakes working, we've got a flap lever now. The flap lever was at 5 degrees. Yeah, so that's important to know about. So for takeoff, 737 typically takes off with 5 degrees of flaps. You don't want any spoilers. In fact, I don't think I've even got the spoiler configured. So there we go. So the more important thing you're going to look at up here is, if I move the view slightly so it's in the middle, this is called the mode control panel, and it controls the modes that appear at the top of the primary flight display that tell you what mode the autopilot is operating in. So, and you can pre-configure it on the ground, which means you then don't have anything to do in the air, or not as much to do in the air. So the first thing we're going to do is set the course to the runway direction. So this won't make much sense until we are on approach. But this is a sort of standard operating procedure really for airliners. They typically would go and set the course anyway to the runway direction for departure. But we're going to use it because we're going to land back on this runway anyway, so it will be correct. So we're on runway 22 and the actual direction of the runway is 222 degrees. So we're going to do that on both sides of the aeroplane, and again there's a reason for that as well, and I'll explain it later. So we just go and roll the mouse wheel to bring that back down to 222. We're also going to do the same for the heading. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. So we're going to bring the heading round to 222 degrees as well. And the reason for this is we don't have a flight plan. So as you roll the heading round, you can see the heading bug is moving on the navigation display. So then we're going to set the speed we want to climb out at. We'll go, it's set at 200 by default. We'll tell it to climb out at 220, so 220 knots. And the flight directors are on, or we'll make sure both are on. We can then go and set our altitude. So this is where it gets interesting. So we're going to go and look at London Stansted, and we're going to click on it. This is in LittleNavMap, by the way, which is a freebie tool. It's about 350 feet above sea level at London Stansted, so to begin with, going to press comma on the keyboard just to make sure, yeah, because we loaded on the runway, the altimeter, you know, showing an accurate height above sea level for the aeroplane at its current location. So the reason we're so interested in that, we're going to just climb out to 5,000 feet, but on our downwind leg coming back into the airport, we're going to descend to get to the, well, these are called the ILS feathers. So this is the range where the ILS, you will typically pick up the ILS. And in LittleNavMap it's illustrated, it's not, you know, a real world thing. They don't suddenly stop at the end of the feathers. You might pick up the ILS, depending on the weather, a lot further out. But it's rendered on LittleNavMap as a green triangle that's about 8 miles long. So once you know it's 8 miles long, you know that 8 miles down to the runway apron with a 3-degree glide slope means, if you imagine this is like a slope down, like a slide down towards the runway, means you need to be 2,500 feet above ground level when you're 8 miles out in order to come down the slope and get to the runway at the right point. Yeah? So a 3-degree glide slope means 2,500 feet above the runway elevation. Yeah, so that means we need to add 350 feet to it. So 2,800 feet we'll call it, just for argument's sake. So, like I said, we're going to fly out to 5,000 feet and then we'll descend down to the right altitude for approach. So we're going to set our target altitude for the aeroplane to 5,000 feet. We're going to go vertical speed mode, so you can see this is being reflected over here. We've got a target altitude of 5,000 feet and we've pressed vertical speed mode. We're going to tell the aeroplane to climb at 2,500 feet a minute. Okay, so when we engage the autopilot, it will kick in. It may, I haven't actually tried this yet, it may be that when we engage autopilot it takes the current vertical speed. We'll see what happens with that. Okay, so when we arm the auto throttle, it will default to speed mode, I think, so we'll find that out. But we can do it now. We can also engage heading select mode, and you can see that reflected over there. And the light has come on here. It took a while to come on. So we can pre-arm the modes of the autopilot. So we've gone for vertical speed mode, heading select mode, and just the auto throttle. And you can see there, here, look, throttle hold, heading select, and vertical speed. Okay, so if I press shift and space to center our view back up. And is there anything else we need to check? I'm just having a quick look around. I think we're good. We'll talk about ILS frequencies and things like that when we're flying around the circuit. So, come off the parking brake. Push the throttles gently forwards. Now notice we've got a master caution. It's because we've pushed the throttles all the way forwards. So we're going to wait for the rotate marker on the indicated airspeed ribbon. Just gently rotate, no more than 3 degrees a second. And we're in the air. So gear up. The auto throttle's on, remember. So the throttles will start moving all on their own. And we can press the autopilot button. So it's now going to climb at 2,500 feet, so it did remember. So you can see it's slowly adjusting our climb rate. It's holding the 222 degrees heading and holding the speed, or it's climbing towards the speed of 220 knots. So we can begin lifting the flaps. So we might want to increase our speed out to 250 knots. So you'll see the marker here has moved further away, and you can see the acceleration change that the throttles are making happen. If you watch the throttles, they'll be sliding up and down all on their own. The airplane's controlling them. And you can also see a projected line on the navigation display of how far down the flight path you're going to get to your target altitude, which is set over on the mode control panel and appears above the altitude ribbon. So, if we just sit up a little bit, we can actually enjoy the view for a few seconds. So we're just going to climb out to 5,000 feet, and then we're going to do an about turn and go the opposite direction. In fact, while we're at 250 knots, it isn't going to make much difference to us. So we are going to go heading bug and spin it round to 42 degrees, which is the reciprocal or opposite direction to 222 degrees. Okay, so you can see there's the heading bug line. There's another airport out in front of us. We can increase the range on the navigation display. If we have a look on the LittleNavMap, you can see there's our takeoff line. Notice there's a 4-knot crosswind coming from the simulator that's just pushed us off the track. So we're moving further and further away. That actually will play to our advantage, because if we maintain 250 knots around the circuit, when we come back in, we'll be slightly off track, which will be good, because then I'll be able to show you the symbology on the HUD. Well, not the HUD, the primary flight display. Although this does have a head-up display, doesn't it? So, not that we're going to be using it today. We don't need it. All the head-up display really shows is the same symbology that's on the primary flight display anyway. So we're coming down for the downwind leg. We're at 5,000 feet, we're doing 250 knots, so it's just following the autopilot, doing exactly what we asked it to do. So the game we're going to be playing is to get out to about 10 or 12 miles out from the airport. So how are we going to do that if we haven't got a flight plan? What we're going to do is tune into the ILS. So the ILS frequency for runway 22 at Stansted is 110.50. So if you go and look down on the panel down here, there are 2 nav radios, one this side and one the other side. So we're going to tune in the frequencies. When you are tuning in these radios, let me move the view around so I can show you it easily. Okay, so here's the nav radio. When you key frequencies in, you are always keying in on the bottom line. So this is the standby frequency, and this is the active frequency that the aeroplane's actually using. You can see they're both the same. So if I put in 122.5, you just key the numbers, you don't have to put the point in. If I was to change that over, notice it remembers, so we've got 12250. If I was to put that over, it will say error, because that's not even in its range of possible frequencies for ILS. So it does check what you've put in, it won't allow you to put nonsense in, as I just did. Now, I've got 110.50, but as a VOR frequency, which will work. It will allow us to steer towards the beacon that the ILS operates from. But we need to know our vertical position as well, and that's what ILS does over VOR. I'll show you it when we switch over to it. So we want the same frequency, so clear this, 11050. We want the same frequency. So this one is set up for VOR, this one's set up for ILS. If we wanted this to be the VOR, we can just change the mode. But we want it to be the ILS frequency, and then so we switch it to active, and it's now the ILS. So what does this mean to us? If we change, so we're flying along on heading mode, yeah? If we change this to approach mode on the display, on the navigation display, notice we've now got DME showing up. So this is showing you the data related to the ILS radio. You can see it here, look. So 6.7 miles away, 6.8, 6.9. And if we have a look on the map, you can see we are coming towards, remember that's 8 miles away. So we're streaking out down range, but we're tuned in to the ILS. As long as you've got this on approach mode, it shows you what's going on with the nav radio, not what's going on with the GPS. Okay, and you can see here it's saying the glide slope is off to our left, and we are above it at the moment because we're at 5,000 feet. Yeah, so we'd need to be probably at this distance. Remember we said probably about 2,800 feet would put that marker in the middle. We're way above it, so the line is below us. So what we're going to do is slow down. We're going to do several things at once, just to show you it. So we'll set 200 knots, and we'll start the aeroplane turning, and we'll get it to come down to 2,800 feet. So we're going to spin back around to 222 degrees. Notice we haven't told it how to get there, how to get to 2,800 feet, so we're going to say do a level change. So it will prioritize getting to the speed first, and you can see the throttles have dropped back to idle all on their own, and it's now dropping the nose and the altitude's falling off. And you can see as we descend, we're getting closer to that line down to the runway, but obviously we're not going to get there quickly enough. So what we're going to do is pull the speed brakes, and the aeroplane will be able to descend much more steeply without accelerating. And you can see that's pulling us down towards the glide slope. So you can see this diamond appearing. When that's in the middle, we are on the glide slope, but we're going to go below it on purpose. So I'll show you where we are on the map. Look, we're to the left of the line towards the runway. So we're to the left of the line, and we've just gone below the glide slope. So at this distance, at 10 miles out, 3,300 feet was about where the glide slope was. Okay, so what we're going to do to illustrate this, I'm going to go and turn the autopilot off. I'm not sure if that turns both off. Yes, it does. So I'm flying, I've got control now, yeah. I'm going to turn the auto throttle off as well. Remember I said I'd do the first approach myself. Okay, so we're going to start dropping the flaps. So watch this line. So I'm going to steer, or I'm going to use pitch control, the elevators, and trim to chase the diamond vertically. It appears the same here and here. You can watch either. I'll keep it in view so you can see the runway as well, so you can get some idea of what's going on. So we're going to go and put the gear down as well. We're going about the right speed now for the gear, and more flaps. There's a handy chart down here of the speeds you can extend the gear and the flaps. So we're going to trim the aeroplane out. It's a little bit dodgy on this version of the simulator. Now if you go too slow, notice what just happened? That was called a stick shaker. So we're opening the throttles to stop ourselves from slowing down anymore. We have still got the spoilers out, so they come back up, and that will help the aeroplane accelerate. So we're basically throwing this at the runway so I can show you these markers moving around. So we are below the glide slope, we're about to go through it. We're at the right height, but laterally we're not in the right place, but we're going towards it. Okay, so can I get rid of the yoke in this? Yes. So watch the line. That's called the CDI, the course deviation indicator. So if we pull the aeroplane round towards the runway, once we are lined up with the runway, that will be in the middle. So this is the course line. So it's telling us the orientation of the runway, not the direction to it. So our position relative to the runway is shown by the CDI. So we're just off to the left, and we're vertically in about the right place. If we go too high, we're going above the diamond. And if we come back down too low, if we go through the diamond, if we go too low on approach, I know this is a bit of a toboggan ride on the way in. Notice you go below the diamond. Now notice when you get close enough, there are lights at the end of bigger runways called PAPI lights. If you have 2 reds and 2 whites, you are on the glide slope. I've got 3 reds, meaning I'm low. and that corresponds with the diamond. Look, the diamond's above us. Once it's in the middle, we've got 2 reds and 2 whites. If you get more whites, it means you're high. Okay, so I'm just going to trim us out a little bit. The one thing you shouldn't do is fly an airplane on trim. Once you get close, if you're not perfectly trimmed out, just fly it with an offset on your stick. It won't hurt. Okay, so we can almost disregard all of this now and just watch the PAPI lights. And we're aiming to get the wheels somewhere near these big white markers on the runway. So if I press shift and space to straighten our view up.
100 approaching minimums.
When you get to about 50 feet, you can pull the throttles to idle.
40, 30, 40,
and start feeding in back stick.
10.
And we're down. So we're going to go full throttle and pull the flaps back to takeoff configuration. So we're going to let the nose rotate. We're going to have to trim it slightly. Let the plane take back off. Gear back up. Turn the auto throttle back on. Turn the autopilot back on. We need to go to vertical speed, don't we? To tell it we'll come out at 2,500 feet again. Flaps can come up. And we'll tell it to climb out to 250 knots, and we'll let it do it all itself this next time. And because I won't be explaining quite so much, there won't be such a dense flow of things going on. So we're climbing out to 250 knots, 2,500 feet a minute, until we get to 5,000 feet again. We could even start the turn, so you can do multiple things at once. It won't hurt the aeroplane. Notice because we had the heading mode on to start with, it's still on. But we are going to change autopilot modes this time. So we're getting back to 250 knots, 5,000 feet, and flying the opposite direction of the runway, which is 42 degrees. Get rid of the caution light. The caution lights are just coming on because of configuration. Because it hasn't got a flight plan, it's complaining basically, and it hasn't got any data, any of the performance data in the FMC, but you can still fly without it. Okay, so we're coming round towards the reciprocal. Notice we've still got this in approach mode. So if we turn it off, we've got no flight plan, so there's nothing to show. If we go back to approach mode, you see in approach mode the localizer, which is your lateral position, and the glide slope. If you switch this to show VOR mode, you only see the localizer, you don't see the glide slope. Yeah, so you've only got your lateral position to the runway. So if you put it on approach mode, you see both. So we're going to do an automated approach this next time. Now I'm not sure how accurately this is simulated in this version of this aeroplane. So, no, we don't want to do that. So we've got nav 1 here. Here's nav 2. It's already tuned into 110.5, so we're going to switch it so we've got the same frequency on nav 1 and nav 2. So what that should mean, and I think it's done it, look. I don't know how well simulated this is. Yeah. When I turned that on, did it turn... It turned both on. That's interesting. It shouldn't have. But basically, I'm not sure if this is still true of the Max, but the earlier versions of the 737, to get it to do autoland, you had to have both autopilots on and both nav radios tuned to the ILS, and therefore both course knobs tuned to the runway direction. So, we're coming back out downrange. We're obviously, look, we were slower when we initiated the turn. We weren't doing 250 knots yet, so we got a tighter turn radius. So we're going to bring ourselves into the altitude range that we want to capture, as they call it, the ILS. So we're going to drop to 2,800 feet. So we'll use level change to do it. And we can expedite it by helping the aeroplane by using spoilers. Oh look, the spoilers are working. Yeah, there's some odd things in this aeroplane. I turned those back off earlier. Oh, when we landed. I think there's an automated system on the Max. When you get weight on wheels on landing, I think the spoilers will activate. So that's my bad for not seeing that. So we've been flying along with the spoilers out for the last couple of minutes. But yeah, it's another thing worth knowing about. When you get weight on wheels, we'll see it happen again. We'll watch from outside. So remember, we are in approach mode on here. So this is reflecting the distance to the ILS. So we're 9 miles out now. We are still way above the glide slope altitude, but notice that we're further out than we said about that 8 mile drawing on here. That's just a drawing. The radio frequency could reach a lot further depending on the weather, or the radio transmission then from the ILS that we can pick up in the cockpit. So it's not unusual to pick it up 20 miles out. So we want to expedite this descent. So we will go and throw the spoilers out, which means without accelerating, the aeroplane can go a lot more steeply. Yeah, so it's trying to hold its speed. And it's doing a pretty poor job of it, but it's doing it. So we're coming up to the target altitude. Look, 2,800 feet at 250 knots. So we'll take the spoilers back off. And we're going to tell the aeroplane to slow down now without any spoilers to 220 knots. Now notice it's going to slow down really slowly. While we're doing that, we'll also turn it back around towards the airport. So we want 222 degrees again. I'm hoping that's going to give us about the same radius turn that we had last time. Because we were accelerating through the turn last time. This time we're decelerating through the turn. We'll see. Yeah, so you can see we're coming back round. I think we'll still be this side of the runway. But we're at the right height already to capture the ILS. So we're 2,500 feet above the ground. So I'm hoping we won't be dead in line, because then you can see the difference that the aeroplane will make when we go to approach mode on the autopilot. You'll get to see its behavior. So another thing to point out, look, because we are below the glide slope and it's not even on the chart yet, it's a hollow diamond. Same goes for the localizer. For our lateral position, it's a hollow diamond. When it's within range, so it's rendering it within the range of the display, it turns into a solid diamond. And that's when you say you have captured the frequency. You can see, look, we're off to the left, we're at the right altitude, but we're a long way out. Yeah, we're nowhere near 8 miles out, which is where 2,500 feet above the ground would put the diamond in the middle.
2,500.
So you need a little bit of mental arithmetic sometimes to figure these things out, but it becomes natural. So what we're going to do is say, put ourselves on an intercept course with the runway direction. Okay, so you can see the navigation display rotating. So that's the runway direction, that's our direction, and that's how far off the center line we are. This bar, which is also represented by this diamond, which has just gone solid, look. It's now within the realms of this display. So we're going to press approach mode. Watch what the airplane does. Notice it is not climbing. It is holding 2,800 feet, but it's now steering left. Yeah, and it's rotating in to align that in the middle, and it's overshot slightly, but not too much. We'll start slowing down. So we'll take it straight down to say 160 knots and let it bleed some speed off. We can actually use the flaps as well. Remember I said you got the maximum speed for each flap setting is down here. So notice what's just happened. We've hit the glide slope. So approach mode has started descending the aeroplane to chase the diamond all on its own. So we can now manage speed and flaps and just let the aeroplane keep following the glide slope down. So the important thing there is it held the altitude we had commanded until it crossed through the glide slope. And then it switched over to chasing the glide slope. You can only capture the glide slope from underneath the beam. So if you imagine there's a line coming up through the sky past us, if we had been above that line, approach mode would not have started descending. Okay, so we're down to 160 knots. We'll start extending the flaps further, and we'll put the gear down. Landing lights are already on. So we'll let it fall all the way back to 130 knots. It can slow down really quickly now because the flaps are out. So the autopilot is following this down. Now notice, because we've got both both nav radios tuned into the ILS frequency and both autopilots on, we get glide slope flare mode. That means the aeroplane is going to land itself if we let it. So we can sit outside and watch. And you'll see the aeroplane flare all on its own. So it has enough input basically from all of the radio kit on board and all of the kit that's on the ground to figure out exactly where the aeroplane is and to manage the approach itself. So I mean, we could look inside. There's nothing to look at. The airplane's just flying itself down the pipe, basically. That is following the glide slope. The PAPI lights agree. The localizer's in the middle. It's dead on the center line, that means. So let's have a look from outside and see how it does. We are going to be ready on the throttles to pull them back at the last moment and go for reverses. That's down to us. So remember, when we get to 50 feet above the runway or so, we still go for minimal thrust. Oh, it walloped it in, didn't it? It's not very good at it. Okay, so spoilers, and we're steering now. So press shift and space to center it up. So has the autopilot kicked off on its own? Auto throttle hasn't. Let's go and have a look. Yeah, the auto... Oh no, it hasn't, look. So we need to disengage the autopilot as well. And then it's up to us to come off the runway. Spoilers back off. And reverses off. It's worth showing that, actually. I didn't really show you that, so we were busy. When you go to reverses, that's quite nicely animated. So the one thing I couldn't show you there, that's kind of the proper way to do things, you should only use the reversers until you get to about 70, 80 knots, and then you close the reversers and go for wheel brakes. And the reason for that is to avoid ingesting rubbish into the engines. So if you think about it, they're pushing any rubbish on the runway out in front of the aeroplane, and 70 or 80 knots is around about the region where the bits you're pushing forwards could actually get in front of the plane and come straight back in the engines. So there's kind of a lot to take in on board there, but I guess the takeaways are that the systems on board, if you use approach mode, you have the navigation system switched on. If you come in from below the glide slope, that's the key thing. So have everything ready ahead of time. We rushed everything there, so I was in a bit of a scramble to explain things in time. But you know, give yourself 20 miles, 30 miles to come in if you're learning, and check over things. You know, that you've got the ILS configured, you've got speed correct, you've got your altitude correct, you've got the airplane configuration correct. Give yourself time. Obviously, look at that stuttering. Obviously, over time, you get more fluid at doing multitasking and doing more than one thing at the same time, and it doesn't become such an issue. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to park it up on the taxiway. Hopefully, that was useful to lots of people. Yeah, I'm just reading the Livestream comments there. There's still lots of little bugs with this aeroplane, but hopefully they'll get fixed fairly soon. I'm not going to get into what they are today. All I wanted to show today was that you can land it quite easily using the ILS, so either manually by chasing the diamonds on the glide slope and the localizer, or on the navigation display. If it's an approach mode, you get to see the CDI, the course deviation indicator, which slides either side to tell you if you're off to the left or right. So something I didn't show is when we rotate the course. Look at that. Yeah. So that reflects the runway direction. Obviously we're pointing. We did about, 120 degree left turn off the runway, which is why we are off by that much, yeah? So if we continued on that way, you would see that course move around. So that's why we tuned the courses in. So the ILS, or the instrumentation, represented this in a way that made sense to us. It was showing us on the screen the orientation of the runway relative to us. But notice if you put this into GPS mode, so map or plan mode, the course vanishes. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Yeah? It's only in VOR or approach mode that the course means anything. Yeah? Right. I'm going to leave that there. I've got various documents about the 737. There's one available at kofi.com in my shop. So I haven't put a link to it. I'll do a pinned comment on the video pointing towards that, which will take you through getting the airplane ready for flight. Otherwise, yeah, like I said, I'll just reiterate once more, when you're on approach, the key things are to be at the right altitude, so coming in underneath the glide slope. So figure out 2,500 feet above the runway level and try to be at that height at least 10 miles out and configured for landing at the same point, so down to your approach speed, your final approach speed, which is probably going to be about 140 knots-ish. Have the flaps down, the gear down, the lights on, have everything ready. And then all you need to manage from then on is flying down the pipe to the runway. Yeah, chasing the glide slope. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I've said enough repeatedly already. See you again soon.